Thing to say? Then call us now to join the debate on the mother of all talk shows. The only education you can get for free. George Galloway. The mother of all talk shows. With George Galloway. The world is our classroom, and you're welcome to sit in and join the seminar.
Well, as you may already have gathered, I'm distinctly under the weather tonight. In fact, I've got a massive dose of what some people inexplicably call man flu. I think it's the real thing, but some of my family may well have think differently. But that means the guests and you, the callers, will be sharing most of the burden this evening. My monologue cannot be at full power and probably won't last as long as usual. You wouldn't want me dissolving in a fit of coughs. But I do have to set the scene about the multiple failures already visible in the approach to international questions of the incoming Donald Trump administration. Just in the last hour, he has slapped comprehensive sanctions on the state of Colombia in South America because they refused his unilateral attempt to land 2 military aeroplanes full of deportees in their country without so much as a by your leave. Now, the officials of the Colombian government will not be allowed to enter the United States, and 25% tariffs have been slapped on all imports from Colombia. And this just a day after an attempt was made to do the same thing in Mexico, an altogether bigger enchilada, if you'll forgive the pun. Mexico is a very large and important country, both in the Americas and throughout the global South. It has a highly respected, democratically elected, unimpeachable woman president of considerable note. And she told Donald Trump to get lost. The idea that Latin American countries are going to allow themselves, without negotiation of any kind, without payment of any kind, to be a dumping ground for the United States, frankly, showboating with tiny numbers of deportees. I mean, there are tens of millions of illegal immigrants inside the United States. 110 on a plane to Colombia is not even a drop in the ocean. So now we await what Trump will do about Mexico. Will he try to do what he's done about Colombia, or will he end this foolishness and get around a table with his neighbors and bring about an agreement that will facilitate the perfectly legitimate United States government wish to rid its country of illegal immigrants? A country which has no border isn't a country at all. A country which has no border cannot be described as a state. A country elects a government, and they, and no one else, must determine who is allowed into it and who must leave. But international law is very clear. You can't just put people on an airplane and drop them anywhere else that you fancy. And so there's trouble at mill on the Latin American front, especially as little Marco Rubio, the new Secretary of State for the United States, is pretty hot for regime change in countries like Nicaragua and perhaps Venezuela and even Cuba. So trouble in the insultingly phrased backyard of the United States. Actually, the United States is the backyard of Latin America, but understandably, they don't like it put that way. And of course, in the north of the Americas, Donald Trump continues to boast that he's going to absorb Canada, a British Commonwealth country, with a functioning parliament and government led, alas, by one idiot after another. but a huge country, second biggest country in the whole world. Donald Trump's just going to eat it, just like that. Make it the 51st state of the Union. Again, he didn't even talk to the Canadian political class before shooting off his mouth about ending their national sovereignty. And ditto in Greenland. Now, it may very well be that so cuckolded is the Danish government to the United States that they will simply sit down and watch whilst Donald Trump has his way with their sovereign territory of Greenland. But no, they've washed their hands. They've said this is a matter for the people of Greenland, and as I've pointed out before, there's only 50,000 of them, and I've no doubt that Donald Trump Jr. has already offered to make each and every one of them a millionaire. And it may very well be that Denmark allows Greenland to be absorbed as a United States territory. How Russia will react to that, given its proximity to the Arctic, where Russia has vital national interests, will again be a matter of some importance. And the Panama Canal. Trump shot the breeze with what turns out to be entirely fallacious argument. He said, we built the Panama Canal, and now China is running it. That would indeed be a remarkable thing if it were true, but it is fundamentally untrue. China is not running the Panama Canal. The Panama Canal is run by the Panamanian state, which was given back control of its own sovereign territory and the canal therein by the United States of America, not even 50 years ago. So when Trump says that we are going to take back control of the Panama Canal, he is picking a fight with an otherwise deeply loyal satrap in the state of the presidency of Panama. But the two biggest enchiladas of all are the ones that are going to occupy me for the rest of the monologue. I was very happy that Trump beat Kamala Harris because I believed he was going to stop the war in Ukraine. And as that war was pregnant with the greatest threat ever since World War II of a nuclear conflagration between the superpowers, no issue, none, could conceivably be more important than that. All other issues, whether Palestine or gender or economic policy, all of these things pale into insignificance if the world goes up in nuclear smoke. And we've asked the question in our poll tonight, and it's pretty damn close. Will Trump end the war in Ukraine? Yes or no? Although a very small majority say yes, a very large minority say no. And the proximate reason for that is undoubtedly Trump's loose-jawed rhetoric about Russia over these last few days. I understand that he has a public opinion at home. I understand even more that he has a deep state constituency just waiting for the opportunity to spout Russia, 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 as they did for 4 long years during his first term. I understand his need as the author of The Art of the Deal to come to the table with apparently something in his hand to negotiate. But that's not what worries me. What worries me is that the statements of the United States president are so utterly ignorant of the facts that one must conclude that he either does not read the papers that are being given to them, or the same people that gave Joe Biden the papers are writing the papers for Donald Trump. Let's just analyze one or two of the blunders that Trump made. First of all, he said Russia helped the United States to win the Second World War. I had this vision of, a Trumpian figure up the flagpole at the Reichstag, flying the stars and stripes over the rubble of Berlin as Hitler lay dying just a few hundred yards away. Russia helped America to win the Second World War? Are you crazy? 88% of all German casualties in the Second World War were inflicted by the Red Army. The Soviet Union lost at least 26 million people in repelling and conquering the Nazi beasts in the Second World War. Britain and the United States didn't even lose 1 million between them. That's not in any way to denigrate or invalidate the great sacrifice made by the other allies in the Second World War. In fact, if it hadn't been for Britain's refusal to surrender, the Second World War would never have happened in the way that it subsequently did. If Churchill had said, "Okay, hands up, give us your surrender terms," things would have been very different indeed. And of course, particularly on D-Day in 1944, the sacrifice of American GIs, Canadian forces, and others, as well as, of course, the British, from whose territory the invasion was launched, made very serious contributions to the defeat of the Nazis in the West. But the war was not won in the West. The Soviets were already on their way to Berlin when finally, after years of delay, a second front was opened. Take this in the context that on the 80th anniversary, tomorrow, of the liberation of Auschwitz, Russia is not invited, even though it was Russian troops who liberated the camp. The Ukrainians are there, though they built the camps. The Poles are there. They were their camps. The Germans are there, though it was Germany that killed the best part of 100 million people in the Second World War. And Russia is not invited to the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz. But even all of that is not the most serious blunder that Donald Trump made, running off at the mouth just the other day. The most serious blunder was when he threatened Russia with tariffs and sanctions. Now, why that is important is that there is nothing to put tariffs on. And if Donald Trump doesn't know that, if he doesn't know that there is no trade between Russia and the United States, therefore nothing to put tariffs on, then one wonders just how closely he's been reading this brief. He went on to say that Putin had wrecked the Russian economy, when it's the European economies that have been wrecked at American insistence. The Russian economy is booming. It's booming. Trump seems to think it's been wrecked. And therefore, a significant number of people are asking themselves, is this Donald Trump for real? But perhaps the most immediate, incredible blunder made by Trump this day was to state that he intends to force Jordan and Egypt to take the refugees from Gaza, 1.5 million of them. Now he's promising a house for all these Palestinian refugees. Like they put up 76 years of struggle because they wanted a new house, a council house. Does Donald really think that the Palestinians in Gaza can be purchased for a council house in Jordan or in Egypt? How stupid is that? Now, of course, even worse, from America's geopolitical point of view, both of the Jordanian and Egyptian states would collapse if they were to agree to the mass, unwilling transfer of millions of Palestinian refugees into their country. Jordan is already more than half of its population are Palestinian refugees. And Donald thinks that the king can take more. He thinks the king can say, yes, please, build us some council houses and send us millions of Palestinian refugees so that Israel can have Gaza as a piece of real estate and a new gas station. How many Arab governments do you think, Donald, could survive that level of betrayal, upheaval, social dislocation? And the Palestinians would not go. I give you that cast iron assurance. They would rather live in the rubble of their house in Gaza than in your brand new Kushner designed and built council house in Jordan or Egypt. Because it's not about houses, Donald. It's not about economic well-being. If the Palestinians had been interested in pound, shillings, pence, dollars, cents, standard of life, they would have surrendered in 1948. They would have said, okay, we've lost. Our country no longer exists. It's been wiped off the map. Hire us to hew your wood and draw your water. And by now, they'd have a decent, if third world, standard of living. But they did not do that. And they will not do that. Because for them, this is a matter of national liberation. Surely Americans can understand that. They had a country, then they didn't. They want it back. They want to be able to live as Palestinian citizens in Palestine. I've got a better idea for you, Donald. Two, actually. Move the Palestinian refugees from Gaza into the Galilee, into Nazareth, where there is plenty of land, plenty of what you insultingly called Arab villages, though they are towns and cities. And then the Palestinians in Gaza will still be living in Palestine. That's what to do, but even better. Here's an even better idea. Why don't you take your finger out your substantial arse and do something about all these promises that were made on the White House lawn by your predecessor, whose funeral you attended, that there should be a Palestinian state with Jerusalem as its capital. I'll be right back. Stay tuned.
We interrupt this program to bring you a special announcement. A big thank you to all our wonderful listeners as the mother of all talk shows podcast is now one of the most listened to political podcasts in the entire world. We are the #1 English-speaking political podcast in the Middle East, and in the last year alone have charted in the top 10 in podcast land in Pakistan, Russia, and China. Like, rate, and subscribe to the MOATS podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your podcasts to be a part of the fastest rising independent news show in the world.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Well, will Trump end the war in Ukraine? That's the poll, yes or no. On Telegram, 43% only say yes. On X, on Twitter, 60% say yes. On the YouTube community poll, by far the biggest constituency, 49% say yes. And on the YouTube stream, 49% say yes. These are worryingly low numbers, Donald. If you're going to keep your promise, you've got some persuading to do. If you want to call the show, it's toll-free in the US and Canada, +1 844 944 3344. It's free of charge in the UK and Ireland, 08081965522, and the worldwide number is 0044203966265. Get your calls in now. Now, a great friend of the show and regular guest and imparter of humour and wisdom is Sabrina Salvati, better known as the host of Sabby, Sabs podcast. And she joins us again now. Sabrina, thanks for being here tonight. I don't know if you heard my introduction, but I was effectively saying that Donald Trump's made a very poor start to the course this year. He's going to have to try harder. Is that a feeling you identify with?
100%. I mean, if we look at Gaza right now, we can tell that obviously Donald Trump is working in Benjamin Netanyahu's favor, which I think many of us predicted would happen anyway. But his outreach to Egypt and to Jordan and to ask them to take the Palestinian people from Gaza, it all just leads to what many of us have predicted all along, which is that this is a land grab, not just for Israel, but possibly could be for Donald Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, who's also interested in the Gaza coastline because of the resources there. I've seen multiple pictures where Israel has shown that they want to develop the Gaza Strip into a resort-style location. So this was never really about Hamas, which I continued to tell people before. If they were really trying to get Hamas, they knew Hamas was in the tunnels, they would have gone into the tunnels. It was about cleansing the land. They want the land and they want the Palestinian people gone. He has also lifted the ban that Joe Biden had against the 2,000-pound bombs to Israel. He lifted that ban. So I think that's a clear message to people there. And in the case of Russia and Ukraine, he did claim that he would end this war, I think like the first week of his presidency or maybe even the first day. And obviously that has not happened. So when it comes to foreign policy, Donald Trump seems to be dragging his feet a little bit when you compare it to the promises that he made to his supporters.
And he's now picked new enemies in Latin America. On top of Cuba, Nicaragua, Venezuela, he's now picked on Mexico and Colombia.
That's right. And I do want to give a warning to people about these sanctions. Number one, I'm against economic sanctions, and you should be as well, not just because it hurts the people in those countries, but also this will have an impact on our economy here in the United States. Every time they put sanctions on these countries like Mexico, which is a country where we get a lot of our auto parts from, I'm not sure if everyone's aware of that, but sanctions on Mexico, sanctions on Colombia, that means that prices here in the United States are going to increase, right? So one of the big concern from voters here is that the prices were too high. Eggs were too high, and other grocery products were too high. And all of us have been experiencing that. And that's why some people voted for Donald Trump, because he said that he would fix the prices and he would get this turned around. The reality is, folks, as long as he is putting sanctions on countries where we actually do get products from, that means that the prices are going to increase. I was just at the grocery store the other day and I did see that the egg prices are increasing again. So this was a big top concern from people, was the economy, and sanctions are never good for that country or for us as well. So people need to get prepared for that.
Yes, indeed. Now, just going back to Palestine for a moment, I've just seen in the last couple of minutes that Israel has told UNRWA, the United Nations Relief Works Agency, to clear out of East Jerusalem by the end of the month, and has withdrawn all licenses and permissions for UNRWA to operate anywhere in the occupied territories. This is a clear, blatant breach of international law. Every country that is a signatory to the various international laws and conventions dealing with occupied territory is required to allow the United Nations relief work to continue. Israel has now peremptorily booted them out. Now, in a sane world, Israel would be booted out of the United Nations for that crime, if for no other. But it's unlikely that Donald Trump, on current form, is going to do anything about that either.
That's correct. And this would have happened with Kamala Harris as well. This is what I want people to understand. This is why there were many of us in the U.S. that did vote third party and didn't support either one of these parties. Both of these parties, the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, they both answer to AIPAC, which is a lobby interest group here, probably one of the top lobby interest groups. A lot of our Congress members do take money from AIPAC. So they're working for Israel. They're not working for the American people. Israel has not been held accountable. That's part of the reason why, is because of the lobby interest groups. But also we have these entities like the ICC and the ICJ, which have condemned some of the crimes that Israel has done, but there's nothing in place from those institutions that actually enforces what they have said is wrong. So they can't enforce Israel to stop doing what they're doing. And that's where I believe the other part of the UN comes in, the Security Council. This is where you see all the time that the representative from the United States, Ambassador Linda Greenfield, she's the one that raises her hand to stop it, to stop the accountability. So the United States government has continued to fund Israel regardless. Before October 7th, they've been funding Israel. They continue to fund them so that in Israel, everybody has health care. We don't have health care here in this country. Everybody doesn't have it. In Israel, you can go to college for free. You can't go to college for free in the United States. They are willing to do whatever they can to help Israel, even if that means that Americans here will not get those benefits and will suffer. So what we have here is a full hostage situation where these lobby interest groups like AIPAC and J Street have such a hold over our political space. And that is why these things are not being done the way that they should be. This is why Israel is not fully being held accountable. So people really have to follow the money here. Even though we may have some representatives that don't take money from AIPAC, it doesn't matter in the end because the party as a whole does. And that's how we get here. So no one's going to hold Benjamin Netanyahu accountable or Israel accountable until we get corporate money out of electoral politics.
Now, it's an ill wind that blows nobody any good, and at least it's blowing fair for the big tech bros. I don't know how many hundreds or billions of taxpayers' money is about to be given to them for a new generation of AI, which China has just left at the starting blocks before it's even got off the mark. What's people's feeling about that?
I think there are some concerns here in the U.S. about AI. More people are I would say a couple years ago, people were a little bit more curious about it, but I think more people are afraid of it now because of some of the concerns surrounding AI. We have been warned also about open AI. People are worried that they may lose their jobs to AI. This is another thing that's been brought up. But I think at the end of the day, this comes down to an oligarchy that we have in this country where there is a war against the 99% of us, and that is the billionaire class. These billionaires have basically decided how we are going to live our lives, what benefits we are going to have in this country. And as long as we have that oligarchy, I don't really see things changing for the 99%. This is where something like Occupy Wall Street was actually a really good idea, because they understood that. They understood that it's the bankers. They understood that it's the billionaires that are not having our best interests in mind. And they have a full scale like war, economic war against the 99%, against the working class in this country. I think what we will have to change things is there is going to have to be a worker movement, which I know that Jill Stein and Shama Sawant are working on that now, a worker movement. And they have a conference in February to kick that off, because we've tried this through the political parties. We had progressive candidates go into the Democratic Party to try to fight back with inside the party. Didn't work because the party belongs to Wall Street and the military industrial complex. I think some people tried that with the Republican Party, with the Freedom Caucus. You see Matt Gaetz is gone, et cetera. So the reality is the billionaires are controlling a lot of interest in this country and also in other parts of the world.
Yeah, it's bound to be the case that there begins to be pushback from the blue-collar, working-class, make America great again, America first, working class represented in a very inchoate and often obscenely wrong way by people like Steve Bannon. There's no obvious connection between the politics of Bannon and the politics of Elon Musk, for example.
Correct. I mean, at the end of the day, I think when you look at someone like Elon Musk, he's going to look out for his class, right? So he's a billionaire. He's going to make sure that his interests are protected. And this is something that I wish that both people, or people on both sides of the political aisle, would fully understand, that at the end of the day, regardless if you're a Democrat or Republican, there is one group that's against the majority of us, and that's the billionaire class. And they are the ones that are calling the shots. So yeah, it's a problem to have a president that's a billionaire. And I've sounded the alarm about this before. It's a problem to have Elon Musk a part of Trump's administration. He's also another billionaire. But make no mistake, while the Democrats are telling you that we have an oligarchy that's forming in this country, the oligarchy has been here for years. And the Democratic Party also happily takes money from that same oligarchy. So we have to be very clear that we send the message that both of these political parties support the billionaire class. It was one candidate that we saw in 2016 and 2020, and that was Bernie Sanders, who said we have to fight back against the billionaire class. And you see the Democratic Party didn't want that to happen then. So at the end of the day, that's who they answer to. This is why they are very weak when it comes to Israel. They'll say a little bit to make you think that they care somewhat about the Palestinian people. They don't. They're all in on this. They all know that this was going to be a land grab. They all knew what Israel was doing, and they all decided to go along with the parties that support that interest because they're all bought off at the end of the day.
What of the Democratic Party now? Black people in America have historically identified with it, at least for 100 years or so, maybe a little less. Not so much when the Democrats represented the slave owners. But the trend seems definitely to be that the minority ethnic communities are abandoning the Democratic Party. What remains of the union movement, blue-collar workers, organized workers, has already abandoned it. It just leaves the political class, the candidates and their families and their staff in many parts of the country. Can they renovate themselves, or are they for the trash can of history?
I think the question is, do they want to do that? I don't think the party as a whole wants to do that. I think there are certain members that are a part of the Democratic Party that do want a working class agenda and do want to help the 99%. But the Democrat leadership doesn't want that, and their donors don't want that. So that's the unfortunate part. I do think that we are seeing a lot of change. This election with Kamala Harris, we did see that Kamala Harris did lose the black vote. Regardless of what corporate media tells you, the numbers will show that, yes, black women heavily came out to support Kamala Harris, but black men did not. So when you put both of those numbers together, you will see that black people heavily did not come out the way that they did for Barack Obama. This has been a trend since Obama 2012. Hillary Clinton lost some of that support. Biden lost some of that support. And now Kamala has lost even more. It's continuing to decline overall. And what is happening is not so much that black voters as a whole are going to the Republican Party. Some are, but most are not. Most are choosing to stay home. There were about 8 million voters that voted for Joe Biden that did not turn out to vote for Kamala Harris. The Democratic Party cannot win in the United States without the black vote. So there is frustration on that front. You see a little bit different with the Latino vote. The Latino voters, there was a shift over towards Donald Trump where he was able to capture the Latino vote. But for black voters, I think a lot of us are just tired, and we don't feel, I would say older black voters are more likely to come out and support the Democratic Party. Younger black voters are more willing to support third party alternatives or just sit the entire election out. And that's what we've been warning people about for years. And it took Kamala Harris's campaign for that to really be brought forward in the spotlight. But I don't think the Democratic Party really wants to change. I think they're just going to go with what the donor class wants them to do.
That's the $64,000 question, as we used to call it, when that was more money than it is now. Sabrina Salvati, host of the Sabby Sabs podcast, co-host of Revolutionary Blackout Network. Thanks for joining us on the show tonight. Let's take a quick break, then it's your calls. Stay tuned.
All the activists that have been making noise about what Israel is doing, the genocide. And so, it takes a world to make this happen, but thank God Trump is leading the pack. But my question to you is, can we celebrate? It seems like it's too soon to celebrate because we don't know, what's really going to happen. I just don't trust those Israelis. They say one thing and do another. Look what they're doing in Lebanon. So what is your level of optimism for this latest attempt at a ceasefire? And that's my main question. So I'll let you answer
well, at
that.
At least 75%, Wendy, and cautious celebration. A non-alcoholic glass of champagne, perhaps. Actually, I recommend that in general, especially date champagne. Has anyone out there tasted date champagne made entirely from dates? And of course, non-alcoholic. It is superb. If I could get my hands on one of those this evening, which I definitely can't, I would be having a glass of that and quietly, cautiously celebrating. But you are absolutely right to say, God bless Jeffrey Sachs and all the other speakers and activists who have striven might and main in all weathers, in all countries, in all parts of the world to help bring about the atmosphere that has prevailed and has forced the American presidency to be changed, and for the American presidential policy towards the war to be changed. I'm in no doubt about this, why I mentioned them first. Trump is the reason there is a ceasefire. He is the reason. If Harris had won, there would have been no ceasefire. That's quite an achievement, before you've even got your feet in the presidential slippers.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Will Trump end the war in Ukraine? Yes or no? You can vote on my Telegram channel, t.me/George Galloway, on my Twitter, my X, on the YouTube community poll, and on the YouTube stream. Let's take our first call of the evening from England, from Swindon, where David wants to talk about Donald Trump. Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, I'd like to talk about Donald. I phoned at 7, and I wanted to talk about the land grab in Gaza, flattening and rebuilding, moving the people out. But you've already covered that admirably. So I'd like to move on to another topic, which is the seizure of Russian assets around the world to pay for the war or rebuilding. What Trump doesn't realise, and this has been reported by Reuters, is that there are $300 billion of outside assets in Russia. So it's not a zero-sum game. So Russia could seize the assets of European and American companies to the tune of $300 billion. So it's not a zero-sum game. And I think, again, he's dropped the ball on that one. I think he's got a very loose mouth.
No, I agree with you. I agree with you, David. There's another worldliness about all of this, as if they were holding the whip hand in this. The kind of rhetoric is the kind that you use when your adversary is on their knees and you're making up your mind what to do with them. But that's very far from the case in Ukraine. Russia is advancing hourly. I mean, at this rate, there won't be any Ukraine left to negotiate about if they don't get serious, and very quickly. Last word to you, Dave.
Yep, and okay, very quickly, where do you think BRICS will fit into this? Are they going to come to the support of all these countries that he's trying to threaten to take over or sanction or whatever? So how is BRICS going to develop a strategy on this?
Well, slowly. It advances at the pace of the consensus that can be reached. And it's not a smooth or linear process. So, for example, when we were at the BRICS in Kazan in Russia just a couple of months ago, Venezuela arrived with their check to pay their annual membership fee, and Brazil vetoed it and caused a great deal of stir. And until now, it's causing a great deal of stir. I was in Venezuela just a week or so ago, and they're pretty bitter about it, I can tell you. So BRICS is a great hope, but it's not here yet as an alternative to the United Nations, as an alternative to the corrupt international institutions. First of all, because it has a lot of people in it who are 1 foot in it and 1 foot in the other camp. Secondly, because it has a lot of people in it who are intrinsically not that strong. And it has people in it who are strong, like India, who are in a semi-detached relationship to it. And it all depends on China deciding to exercise the political weight in the world commensurate with its economic power. Thanks, David, in Swindon. Now, please check out our new website. It is stunning, MOATS.tv. On there, you'll be able to watch the show live, and that could, in the end, be important. For example, we've got Scott Ritter on the show later, but we cannot interview him on YouTube because YouTube, for some bizarre reason, have forbidden us, though not others, to have him as a guest on our show. So big tech cannot be relied upon. And so, if you're watching on our own website, you'll be much more likely not to suffer any interruption. You can watch the show live. You can see the clips from our interviews, watch my monologues in full. And here's a point, our new and improved donation feature. Click on the Donate Now button anywhere on the site and donate whatever you can afford in any currency you like. One-off donations are welcome, even better recurring donations, either every week, every month, every quarter, every year. Whether it's £1, $10, 20 euros, you decide. But give something. The new easy-to-use form is ready and waiting at MOATS.tv. A big thanks and congratulations to Jason Rattray, who became the first person in history to donate to the show on the new website, and moreover, a very handsome one, £100 recurring donation. Thank you so much, Jason, for that. And also a big hello to Martina Wenske, Don Johnson, and Jeff Woodland, who also donated on the website this week. Joubert in Texas on Trump. Let's try Joubert.
Hey, George, how are you doing today?
Okay, thank you. What would you like to say?
Well, first off, I want to say this is my second time calling into the Mother of All talk shows, and I just want to talk about Trump and the tariffs. Now, I will say a lot of you guys have it kind of wrong on the tariffs issue. And the whole thing with immigration, Trump has already stated that he already told the world, he told the countries that, hey, this is what is going to happen if you don't take back your illegal criminals who came into our country. And so what's happening with Colombia is exactly what he said he was going to do. As far as that goes, I agree with him on that because, the United States, we can't take these people, and he said he wanted to get rid of them. And I think it's only fair that Colombia takes back their people. And if they don't do it, hey,
well,
the Quantico, go ahead.
It is, Joubert, of course, America's business who it kicks out the country. But it's other people's business where he kicks them to. You cannot just land a plane with 110 criminals on it without any discussion with your neighbor whose airport you're about to dump these people at. That's not how international relations works. As he found out, the plucky little president of Little Colombia told him to do one. I think he deserves our salute for that. Comments on YouTube. Scan the QR code now. Leave a comment on the YouTube stream. Keep it clean. We'll read it out on MOATS. Landrew, for example, says Russians are saying to ignore Trump after his disrespect. My Russian friends consider their victory in World War II as holy. Amen to that. And Crowhawk says Trump's attempt to ethnically cleanse Palestinians from Gaza to Jordan leaves him open to the charge of complicity in a crime. Of course it does. But he doesn't seem to mind. Let's go to New York, where the legend that is Erobos is on the line. Go ahead, Erobos.
Salutations and greetings. A grand rising to you.
Thank you.
And much convalescence, rest, recuperation, rejuvenation, and refit. I solely call in, even though I called in to talk about the commentary, I heard your call in the beginning requesting some vocal support, and so I have a triumphant amount of vocal support to lend to MOATS or give to MOATS anytime I am able and can do it.
Thank you.
As far as the poll goes, oh yes, and of course, shout out to your family and the most wonderful and auspicious Miss Gayatri Galloway and the children and the beautiful MOATS staff. As far as the poll goes, I don't think it's up to him as far as Trump. Will Trump end the war in Ukraine? I think that's up to Russia. And the reason why I say that is even if Trump wanted to give them arms and empty the stocks and, empty the barracks and send every single bullet to Ukraine, they're still going to lose. It's just going to be a protracted, there's not going to be any Ukraine left. And I think Trump is, in a sense, he's resilient and he's a fighter. He's demonstrated that. I don't know how many cases they had against him in that lawfare situation. I know of any other president except maybe a Roosevelt or somebody like that would have been able to withstand all of that and keep moving forward. But he's on the he's on the stage with the big boys now, right? He's and this is not 2016 or whenever. Russia's far more advanced economically, militarily. They have the best army in the world. They've been practicing and training in live combat for 3 years. On February 22nd, I think would make it 3 years or whatever it is. The point is, I don't think it's up to him to stop it. And I think one of his former employees there, General Mattis, put it aptly. He said, it's not up to us. It's up to the enemy when the war stops. We can declare it stopped. We can declare it ended. But the enemy has a say. The enemy has a vote on when it ends. And this is what they've learned in Iraq, Afghanistan, and everywhere else. I just wanted to share that perspective, and I'm open to any other questions, so you could rest your pipes a little bit if you find it so within your
I would actually like your take on whether Trump is being badly advised or whether he's stupid. I mean, I've often said, you've heard me, that our rulers are not James Bonds, they are Austin Powers. Trump's behaving like Austin Powers this last week on these foreign policy questions, which begs the question I'm asking you. Is it the quality of those advising him, or has he lost it?
I think for him, he likes to gamble a lot. He's always been that way, even when he was ensconced in the mob here in New York City. He likes to gamble a lot. He likes to take risks. He's that type of a man. And I think it's important to watch what he does, not so much what he says, because he says crazy things. He just flies off. He's very impulsive. And I'm not a Trump whisperer by any means. It's just what he does is more important a lot of times than the thing that he says. However, he could get caught up in his own hype. He could get high on his own supply, as we used to say, back in the 80s. Mm-hmm. And if he's not careful, he's gonna come to find that the people that he's pushing around and cajoling and different things, that they're going to push right back. But it also reminds me of what he used to call Kim Jong-un, Kim Jong-il, the little rocket man, right? And that pissed off Kim quite a lot. But look how it ended, right? Now he's, throughout his previous campaigns, he writes me letters where it's like love letters. It's unbelievable. Can you believe that? He's such a great guy. We're best of friends. So I think it's sort of his way of trying to intimidate. It's like being at a gambling table, and you're sitting there with shades on and you're playing poker cards to your chest. And, you may do some aggressive things. I'm going all in, going half in. I think it's a game for him, a game of geopolitics and also spheres of influence. I think he's serious about Greenland. I don't see how they'll stop him. If he says, Marines go and take Greenland tomorrow, that's a wrap. So he's playing a gambler's game. He likes walking on a razor's edge.
What a brilliant call. Erebos, as always, thanks very much for joining us on the Mother of All Talk Shows. Now, the podcast has had a great start to the year. Top 40 in Sweden, South Africa, Mexico, and France this week. You can download the MOATS podcast by scanning the QR code on your screen now. And you can listen to the weekly podcast via the MOATS.tv website. Let's go to California, where Tyrone has a point of view on Erebus vision. Go ahead, Tyrone.
Hi, George. Nice to talk to you again. Hope you feel better. Yeah, it's interesting because I spoke with you last week about the fires, but I also wanted to point out something that I thought was extraordinary that happened in L.A. It happened Thursday. The big fires were mostly on Tuesday and Wednesday, but on Thursday there was, in Los Angeles we have these police pursuits, and there's helicopters from the news channels that follow them, and they put them on the TV. You might have seen the O.J. Simpson one, was a very slow one, but happens all the time in L.A.
Famously,
yes. I don't watch TV anymore, but this thing came up, and it was really extraordinary. And I think it pertains to Erebus wondering what the collapse of the social order is going to look like, civil order, I should say. And what happened is it went on for an hour, okay, and it's very entertaining to watch. I almost feel like I should give a spoiler alert to anybody that wants to see it for themselves, but I'm gonna have to tell you about it, or else it won't mean anything. It's on. You can see it on YouTube. There's a station called KTLA, and it just says large group of motorcycle riders or motorbike suspects. And it starts out, apparently one guy is a young guy on a motorcycle, off-road motorcycle, a little motorcycle, and they were chasing him. And another bike came to join him, which you never see. Somebody else joining a chase. And the guy's on his phone the whole time. These young guys, people of color, I think, and they're very good bike riders. Okay, and they chase these two guys along a long time, and there's all these extraordinary maneuvers, and they lose the cops doing all sorts of crazy illegal stuff on the freeways, and they're working their phones. And then at one point, it was really shocking to me, about 20 other motorcycles joined them. They had been calling for reinforcements. And there's motorcycles and quad bikes, these sort of off-road things with four wheels. And these guys are just having a ball. They're doing wheelies. They're standing on the seats. They're very proficient riders. They look like a bunch of dolphins playing while these cops are chasing them. They stop and get gas twice. The thing goes on for an hour. And spoiler alert, people can shut it off and watch it for themselves. KTLA motorcycle chase. They get away, okay? They just kind of disappear under this bridge. I don't know if they had a truck waiting for them, if they put them in a storage unit, they jumped on a bus, but somehow they got away. And wow. And it's just something you never see, because the announcers are very telling. The announcers are on the side of the cops, and they're trying to stay focused and give the cops information about the first rider. And they're really disturbed, because it always ends the same way. With a crash, the guy gets caught, It's a predictable plot. And this completely broke the paradigm.
Broke the mold. And, well, that was fascinating, Tyrone. I'm grateful to you for it. Another glimpse you've given us of life in the land of the free, the home of the brave. Now, the poll, 21,000 people have voted. It's still a narrow, very narrow majority for yes. Will Trump end the war in Ukraine? 43, 60, 49, 47. Wow, that is close. Okay. Let me take a quick break. We've got Scott Ritter, the one and only, coming up towards the end of the show. We'll take your calls all the way up to Gayatri's social media roundup. Stay tuned. Tony is in New York on the ceasefire. Go ahead, Tony.
Okay, well, first of all, I want to say that I've been listening to you since the 90s in WBAI. That was also the mother of all talk shows.
Oh, wow.
And
it was.
Yes. So I'm 54 now, and I was in my 20s as a political science major at Montclair State University. And, you know, I would listen to BAI, and I'm totally enthralled with your perspective, and now even more. So my question is this.
Thank you, brother.
What would Comandante Fidel Castro say about Gaza right now if he was alive?
Well, I'll tell you, I did have a conversation with a dear friend of ours, Alicia Castro, former Argentine ambassador to London, and prior to that, an Argentine MP. Prior to that, the Argentine ambassador to Venezuela. And we talked not about what Fidel would have done. I'll tell you what he did in Southern Africa. He sent 55,000 Cuban volunteer soldiers to go and fight apartheid and smash it, defeat it, fundamentally kill it in Quito, Cuanavale, in the great battle in Angola. And 10,000 Cuban volunteers left their bones in the African soil, which is not irrelevant to the point I'm about to make. Alicia was making the point, she knew Hugo Chavez so very well, that Hugo Chavez would have had a real problem with the last 15 months because he was a man who felt that he had to do things, omniscience. He felt that he had to be present in such monumentous crises as that. And she thought that Comandante Hugo Chavez definitely would have gone to Gaza. He would have put himself in Gaza, in the middle of all this horror, because he would not mentally, psychologically have been able to bear the shame of not doing so, of merely talking from the sidelines, merely condemning. He would have preferred to go there and die there. That's the kind of man that Comandante Hugo Chavez was, and the kind of man that Comandante Fidel Castro was too.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Now, as I said, coming up later is the one and only Scott Ritter. Remember, we won't be broadcasting the interview on YouTube. You'll have to retune to Rumble, to X or Facebook, because the show will end on YouTube at around 8:40 or so. Scott Ritter coming up later. Let's go to Canada, where RB wants to talk about Palestine. Go ahead, RB.
Thank you for taking my call, George. Yes, this is. I wanted to talk about it from a Canadian perspective. We have a kind of a situation here in Canada. I'm sure some people know about Justin Trudeau supposedly resigning, but taking 3 months to do so while they have a leadership race. The two candidates that are set to replace him, one is Mark Carney, infamously the former governor of the Bank of England and the governor of the Bank of Canada, who has three citizenships, Ireland, England, and Canada, and he looks like he's the front runner. The big money is behind him. He's a confirmed globalist who won't do much to stop what's going on in Israel. And if they do have an election, the conservative member who leads them, Pierre Poilievre, is already on record as he's a 100% supporter of Israel and would support them if they wanted to bomb Iran. So don't expect any help coming from Canada in this situation. But what is extraordinary?
I don't. No.
What is extraordinary is Mr. Trump's ruminations about packing all the people out of Gaza into Jordan and Egypt, and then bringing in real estate development and making it into beachfront property and all these crazy things he's talking about. Meanwhile, he's allowing the settlers to go wild in the West Bank, which of course the Israelis consider biblical for biblical times, their territory. They're openly talking about it. The ambassador that he selected, Huckabee, has talked about that being okay by them. So basically, they're talking openly about a greater Israel. They're talking openly about cleansing, ethnic cleansing the West Bank and Gaza. They're talking about settling Lebanon, also parts of Lebanon. This is absolutely insane. It's right out in front of people's faces, an open ethnic cleansing campaign. And I just want, from your perspective, and like I said, Canada, we're a lost cause. Although supposedly we do support the international, international law that what the settlers are doing is illegal. But if Pierre Poilievre gets in, there won't be much pushback from here. From your perspective, is there any hope? Any hope
that was
at all?
a brilliant summary. No, no hope. Just to remember, no disrespect to all my Canadian friends, but Canada doesn't matter a hill of beans. Canada is a tiny, puny power in the world. It's only significant because it's part of the white European 13% of the global population, and only 8% of the global children's population. So of all the children in the world, only 8% of them are in what we loosely call the West. I say loosely because we count Australia and New Zealand as being in the West. But even if we do that, the vast majority of the people in the world, the majority of the wealth in the world, the vast majority of the manufacturing in the world lies outside of that 13%. So when I'm feeling down about the role of my own country, and I commend it to you, feeling down about the role of yours, just remember that actually we're so last century or the century before that. Zaid is in Watford on Kuwait and Iran. I told you it's the Global University of the Airwaves. Zaid, welcome. What do you want to say?
Good evening, George, and thank you very much for taking my call. I've tried many times over the last few weeks to no avail. So, with what's happening in Gaza and with Trump and Israel inevitably going to be gunning for regime change in Iran, I wanted to speak about the missing piece in the jigsaw, which is Kuwait. Now, it's been very interesting that Kuwait has maintained complete radio silence for the last 15 months on the issue and has not even taken part in the Abraham Accords. And I think Kuwait are terrified that should Israel and America, with Saudi backing, go for regime change in Iran, Iran will retaliate in a reenactment of the Gulf War by carrying out a land invasion of Kuwait, by having the Iraqi Shia militias in the south waving them through in order to enable the Iranian army to then invade Kuwait and probably further into the eastern front of Saudi Arabia, where all the oil wealth is located, thus causing a global economic catastrophe with the oil market, and also forcing Donald Trump into a expensive, complicated land war, which he doesn't want to get involved in. So I'd be interested to find out what your thoughts are on that possible scenario. Thank you.
Well, I'm full of praise, admiration for the cogency of the points that you made, which are all absolutely correct. I won't repeat them, But the vast majority of Iraqis, Sunni and Shia, right-wing, left-wing, centrist, fundamentalist, secular, all Iraqis believe that Kuwait was stolen from Iraq. That's what lay behind the war in 1990 and lies behind it still. If you think of the tiny population of Kuwait and the vast oil and gas reserves under it, you can see why Britain drew a line in the sand and said, this is Iraq and this is Kuwait. Kuwait was merely a walayat, a district of the Ottoman Empire of Mesopotamia, of Iraq. It never at any time was an independent state, let alone a state which was not independent but entirely dependent on Western governments. So the scenario you paint is inherently plausible. I hope that it does not happen. I like the people of Kuwait. I think they have, over the last decades, been playing a better role than their Gulf neighbors. I think they've been trying to stay out of the fly trap of the Abraham Accords and so on. So I respect them, and I hope that doesn't happen. But nobody should be surprised if they wake up one morning and it has happened. Thank you. Zaid in Watford on Kuwait and Iran. Comments now. Raziel the Great says, Colombia will soon find out. Pardon me, don't you dare say no to the evil empire. And Ollie Fox says, Trump isn't threatening to take over BRICS. He's trying to shore up the dollar from Biden's stupidity. He wants BRICS to use the dollar. Well, he ain't going the right way about it if that's what he is hoping for. Stefan Asheri said, why should Trump and his lackeys be interested in peace? Lockheed, Boeing, Raytheon want to make money. And Bobazal says Trump will end the war in Ukraine. They'll need their weapons for the giant Mid-East war they are starting. Well, on the line from Seattle is Nathan on Trump. Let's hear Nathan's view. Go ahead, Nathan. Difficulty connecting with Nathan there. Let's recap on the poll. Will Trump end the war in Ukraine? Yes or no? 21,576 people have voted, and a very, very narrow majority, if at all a majority, it's beginning to disappear, is saying yes. A very narrow majority indeed. Now, I think we've got Kenneth in Edinburgh, and I do hope that's not Elvis. Go ahead, Kenneth.
Hi, George. How are you?
All good, sir. What do you want to say?
Just to mention about the Palestinian, what's going on there. I get the impression that the rest of the world just turned its back on it. And nobody will mention the word genocide. And that's exactly what's happening.
No. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
You're right. Yeah, you're right. You get thrown off the BBC if you use the G word.
They won't mention it. But it's very unfair what's happening. And I feel so sorry for the Palestinian people. They've suffered so much. And to kill all these people is outrageous. You know what I mean? It's just wrong. It's just pure wrong. And Israelis getting away with murder, because that's what they've done. They've murdered all these people.
Yeah.
You know, and it's not right. It's not right, George. What do you say to that?
No, it's not right. It's the worst thing that we've ever done, that humanity has ever done, because when it was happening before, in the Holocaust, we were all at war against the perpetrators of the Holocaust. Now, we're all on the side of the perpetrators of the genocide. Just think about that. Kenneth in Edinburgh, thanks for that call. Nathan in Seattle on Trump is back on the line. Nathan, what do you want to say?
Thank you for allowing me on the show, George. I want to tell a lot of people, let me preface this by saying Trump is horrible. He is someone I never voted for. I will never vote for. I've always had the position that the Democrats are worse because they went into the court and they said that they have no obligation to listen to the voters when it came to who they choose for their candidacy. But I've noticed a lot of people, Trump is, like I said, he's horrible. Some of the stuff he did is common sense. Like 10 years ago, you wouldn't have batted an eye, like saying there are two genders. That is a position that most sane people will agree to. But, you know, I work at a school, and I've seen some faculty just losing their minds over this stuff. It was like one of the teachers was giving this whole speech about moving to Thailand because gender fluidity is more accepted, and I feel like we're losing sight of the plot. You know, Trump releasing the JFK and the MLK and the all of these files on our government assassinating leaders. That's not a bad thing. We need to fight when it makes sense. Elon Musk, people are mad because he did what appears to be a Nazi salute. I'm not mad at that. I mean, I've been saying he's a Nazi for a while. Him and Hitler both got Person of the Year. He's like the ambassador. He allows free speech. We're supposed to, trust, all of this and all of the Tesla robots. It's just like I have my issues with him, but it's just like I think we need to be rational when we choose what we get upset about. And understand democracy is not voting for someone who hates you every 4 years. That is bourgeoisie politics. Democracy is having your will reflected in the policy that they implement. And to that extent, where we don't see our will reflected, we need to organize. We've never had a good president. We've only had good movements. And until we have good movements, we will not see actual democracy because our will never be reflected. We all want no wars. We want health care. Until we can establish movement, and that means coming together with people who you say you hate. Some people say they hate Trump voters. I've run into a lot of that. I will unite with anybody to do good and no one to do bad. And just keep that in mind.
Great call. Great call, Nathan. I 100% concur with all of it. Indeed, I said something like it outside the U.S. Embassy last Monday. In our Bye Biden and Blinken. Good riddance to bad rubbish. You can find that on YouTube. Let's go to the legendary May in Oklahoma. May, what would you like to say?
Hey George, how are you? I know how you are. I'm sorry you're feeling bad. I hope you get well very soon. It sucks to feel bad. If without our health, we have nothing, right? I just wanted to call. I haven't talked to you for a little while and say how much I love and appreciate you. It was good to hear from Irobos. I always love what he has to say. What a wonderful voice. Did I see that you're having Scott Ritter on today?
Yes, he'll be on in about 20 minutes.
I love him. Please, please tell him we are all very much fond of him. But I just want to say that I think, we knew Trump was going to be a mixed bag. He's got his good points. Maybe he's got his bad points. I do appreciate the fact that he got a ceasefire. But again, it looks like, the Israelis are still trying to commit genocide wherever they can get their toe in the door. That's disappointing. It is disappointing. However, as I said before, I was cautiously optimistic, and I think that's how many of us feel. It's just like, well, if he can do something good, that's great, and if he doesn't do too much bad, That's great too. I love the fact that he has gone and talked to the families, the hurricane and flooding victims. He has actually gone to California and talked to the people who are suffering from the fire. So while that doesn't cure everything, at least he's talking and he's listening, which is more than we got Biden to do ever. So it's something that I also
Every
appreciate
word of
about
it.
you. I appreciate
Thank you,
the fact
May.
that
God bless you. Yeah, I mean, I shouldn't be here. I should be in my bed, but the show must go on. Thanks, May. A big hello to Norma in Bristol. She's listening to the show, but too unwell to call in. We're sending her all our love. Let's take a quick break, and then it's your calls right up to Gayatri's social media roundup. Stay tuned. Donald is in Inverness on Assange. Go ahead, Donald.
Hi, George. Good to hear from you again. I'm phoning about Assange, but really your audience is highly privileged to benefit from your international research. I mean, tonight you told us about the misfired missile and the helicopter crash. We'll never hear that on mainstream news. Last time, Gonzalo Lira told us about Poland doubling its armed forces. These are very important pieces of information. Now, information is one thing, but what I want to do, George, is I want to raise the topic of conscience. But I want to illustrate it with an incident that I saw in a documentary in World War II. A U.S. soldier called Glenn Fraser had a Japanese officer's sword at his head, ready to chop it off to make him an example to others. And he was told that he would die for having his hands in his pockets in the cold weather. And did he have any last words to say? So this Fraser looked the fellow, this is the Japanese officer, looked him in the eye, and he told the Japanese officer that he could kill him. But he says, you cannot kill my spirit. He says, and my spirit will lodge in your body and haunt you until the day you die.
Very powerful, Donald. I too, like you, believe in the Judgment Day. I believe in the afterlife. I believe that we will reap what we sow. And I agree entirely with the point you make about conscience. I put it this way, that my conscience is my daily communion with God. And if I follow my conscience, I won't do wrong. And if we all reawaken our conscience, as you beautifully put it, then we will have no need for policing. We'll certainly have less need for policing. And heaven knows we could do with that. You know that they speak the best English in the world in Inverness, and Donald is a good example of it.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Will Trump end the war in Ukraine, yes or no? It's heading towards 50-50. Can you believe that? Will Trump end the war in Ukraine, yes or no? Vote on Telegram, on my X, my Twitter, on the YouTube community poll, or on the YouTube stream. Stig is in Finland on the EU. Thanks for that, Stig. What do you want to say?
Well, I would want to warn everyone in Europe for voting for what I would want to call the fake left. I mean, we have these parties, both in the Nordic countries and in many other countries. That means parties that pretend to be left, but that are actually supporters of the U.S. deep state and the military-industrial complex. I mean, for example, it's a fact that all the all the traditional Nordic left parties, not only the Social Democrats, but also the parties that should be to the left of the so-called Social Democrats, are 100% allied with the regime in Kiev that has made the Holocaust perpetrator Stepan Bandera their idol number one. I mean, for example, recently they voted in the European Parliament for a resolution that supported these long-distance missile strikes into deep into Russia. I mean, something that even the then so-called defense minister of the U.S. and military-industrial complex guy Lloyd Austin was opposed to, but the so-called left parties of the Nordic countries, they were in favor of those long-distance strikes. And then we, of course, have in Germany this so-called left party, Die Linke, that forced out Sarah Wagenknecht from their party because she was for peace in Ukraine and critical to the regime in Kiev. So especially, I don't know how many viewers you have in Germany specifically, but I especially wish that people in Germany who want to have peace in Ukraine and other just causes, that they should not under any circumstances vote neither for the so-called peace chancellor Olaf Scholz and his so-called Social Democrats, but also not fall into the trap to vote for the so-called left party, Die Linke, but to vote
well
for
said.
Sarah
I agree with
Wagenknecht.
you entirely. Sarah is our preferred candidate, and we have many friends in Germany, I assure you. Let's take a quick look at how you can join my other show, Have It Out with Galloway. Watch this. Join me every week to Have It Out with Galloway. We discuss the great issues of the day and occasionally the odd philosophical meandering through the meaning of life. You can be on the show by contacting us at our website, haveitoutwithgalloway.com. You can be the star of the show. Join me on Have It Out with Galloway. Come and have a go if you think you're hard enough.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Well, look, my guest on the next Have It Out with Galloway is Syed Hossein Makki, a very popular guy indeed, and a very, very smart one. Well worth hearing Syed Hossein Makki and me on Tuesday night at 7 o'clock on my YouTube channel on Have It Out with Galloway. Isla is in Mississippi, M-I-S-S-I-S-S-I-P-I, one of the first words of Americana I ever learned. Go ahead, Isla.
George, you are my hero. At the time of Operation Cast Lead, I did not know anything about the Palestinian hell. And I attended a speech that you made in Minneapolis. It was wonderful, and that was my first entry into this hell, this misery they're going through. And I thank you for that. You're my hero. Love your show.
Thank you.
God bless you.
Thank you so much, Isla. We will be back, Gayatri and I, this year, God willing, and we'll make sure everybody knows where we're visiting, where we're speaking. Last word to you, Isla.
To wherever you are. Are you gone, or are you still there?
No, you're still on the air.
Well, we didn't have a choice between Democrat, Republican. It's all the same bag of shit. It's so discouraging because we don't have a will as a people. The will of the people in America is the will of the billionaire class, all the Zionist billionaire class, and the propaganda has many of the Americans are so brainwashed. It's very discouraging right now. It's very, very upsetting. This business
well, propaganda
of
works, Isla. Advertising works, or they wouldn't spend so much money on it. But we have to get better at our advertising. We have to get better at our propaganda and win new people to come along and watch it and to hear it. Thank you, as always, for that beautiful call. Gayatri is in the studio with me for the social media news roundup. What's rattling, Gayatri?
Well, unfortunately...
Apart from my chest.
Unfortunately, your chest and mine too. I'm just on the mend, and I'm so sorry that I have had to pass it on to you.
That's true love.
Alas, that's what happens when you work and live together 24/7. According to Kevin, Dr. Kevin, perhaps I should say, you do not have the flu. He says, George, I've had the flu twice and COVID once. What you have is COVID. Because with the flu, you wouldn't be there coughing. You would be in bed sweating and shivering at the same time, acting like hell, feeling like weak as a kitten. That's how I felt earlier this week. So take a paracetamol and then all will be well. Well, Kevin, Dr. Kevin.
Thank you, Doc.
This is how George woke up this morning. He woke up slowly feeling unwell and then trying to recover, and then so we didn't have time to have, organize a stand-in or anything.
I couldn't speak this morning.
This morning he didn't have a voice at all.
We had to find someone else to present the show. I literally had no voice.
No.
And for me, that's like losing your right arm, right?
Correct.
I need my voice to work.
Yeah. Obviously, so I topped him up with your honey lemon ginger, and it went. George went up and down, and then finally we decided George can go. But here he is, guys. He's here for you guys.
I'm shivering, by the way, even though it's quite warm in this room. I'm shivering.
So the poll: will Trump end the war in Ukraine? I also thought there would be a more straightforward answer to this poll, but it's not. And I think it's because most people think that it's not Trump who will end up the war, it's Mr. Putin himself. So Roy Douglas says Putin will end it on his terms, but Trump will try to take credit. That's his modus operandi. And they will both agree to throw Zelensky under the bus, who will then scurry off to one of his many mansions bought by our tax dollars. Poundland Rod Stewart, I love that outfit. If Trump can bring about a ceasefire in Gaza, binding Zelensky should be a walk in the park for him. The latter's presidential term has expired last May in any case.
Yep.
And then on that subject, Sam Sidat says Russia will end the war victoriously. The USA is more interested in Greenland. So speaking of Greenland, Stephanie Caro says, putting aside for a moment the geopolitical and humanitarian issues with taking over Greenland and building homes for Palestinians outside of their homeland, the big question is how Trump, how are you going to pay for that? 50,000 times 1 million is 50 billion. Here in the US, we have a burgeoning homeless crisis. So millions without health care and crumbling infrastructure. Does Trump really believe that Americans will be okay with giving the Greenlanders $1 million each while the people here are losing their homes? Or likewise to spend billions to remove Palestinians from their land after we spent billions destroying their homes? So Trump's cavalier attitude towards our hard-earned money and his neglect so far of our needs at home proves that he is not a man of the people, nor a friend of the American workers. Yeah, he has not had a good start.
The atmosphere is beginning to sour about him quite quickly, right?
Yeah.
Donald, get back on track.
Please, Orange Man, get back on track, Orange Man. Let me go to Guyo-sama, who says that I have been a follower of George Galloway since 2016, but today I found out that I did not get his post. So that's when I realized that I'm no longer his follower. So I quickly had to follow him back. meaning there are a number of bots employed in order to minimize the spread of your message.
Yeah, my following on Twitter has gone down 300 in the last 3 days.
Yeah.
It's hard to believe that's connected to political disagreement. Even if they were in political disagreement, that wouldn't be a reason to unfollow me. They'd want to see what I'm saying. But 300 in 3 days. Thanks, Elon.
Well, I guess it's not only Twitter, it's all across, because on Instagram especially, you actually are losing followers, which doesn't really make sense. So if you are following George, or if you think you're following George, double check on all platforms. And speaking on all platforms, can I just remind everyone about the new website?
Yeah, will you?
So, please guys, check out this new website of ours. It's the same address, moats.tv. On there you'll be able to watch the show live. You can see all the clips from our interviews and watch the monologues in full. And the wonderful feature is there. It's the improved donation button, which in the past was a bit difficult, but now it's not. It's straightforward. You can organize your donations there and there yourself. Okay, so the donate now button is anywhere on the site, and you can donate whatever you can afford and in any currency you like. We would like to send a big hello to John Moshin, who donated £75 at the start of the show.
Many thanks, John.
Thank you, John.
Really appreciate it.
So,
anything else? I can't take you for chips tonight. I'm going straight to bed. But I'll give you the car keys. You can go for chips if you want them. Poll update. We'll close the poll now. And it's 42 to 58. Yes, no on Telegram. 60 to 40. Yes on X. 49 to 51 on the community poll. And 47 to 53 on the YouTube stream. Wow, my arithmetic, especially tonight, is not good enough to call that exactly, but it's roughly 50-50. Stephanie in Connecticut wants to talk about Trump's economic promises. Go ahead, Stephanie.
Well, actually, Gayatri, thank you for taking that call, but Gayatri just read my message. But I do want to say that if Trump wants to be the people's president and wants really to be a populist leader, then what he needs to do is to make sure that workers in this country get a living wage, that everyone is covered with health care, that no children go to bed hungry at night. We have millions who do. That we have no crumbling schools, that every child gets an excellent education, and that our infrastructure is improved. We got bridges and all sorts of roads and everything in terrible disrepair, and schools in terrible disrepair. That's what he really needs to be doing for the American people, instead of all of this grandstanding about Greenland and, of course, again about pushing Palestinians out of their homeland. That's really all I want to say. How does he expect American taxpayers?
Well, you said it brilliantly. You said it very brilliantly, very beautifully. And don't be shy. Come back again for a longer chat. Stephanie, you sound like you know what you're talking about. Now, if you're watching on YouTube, you won't see our next interview with Scott Ritter, a peerless expert on war and the politics of war, because we are not allowed to have him on our show on YouTube. No one can explain that. No one can explain why he appears on other people's shows on YouTube, but they told us that if we put him on our show on YouTube, they will take the show down. And obviously we don't want that. I'm sure everyone will understand. So here's the solution. Go to our new website or to Rumble, MOATS.tv, where you'll be able to see this interview. You'll be able to see the clip of it, of course, after the fact. But if you want to watch it live, you'll have to move now. Click on the watch page and scroll to MOATS Uncensored to continue the stream. So for all of you on YouTube, it's a good night.